Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joel Scharlat. I'm the Director of Operations here at the Cyber Bytes Foundation. We wanted to welcome you to our October Cyber Bytes Networking Event. We host these events as part of our mission, which is to provide education, innovation, and outreach programs in response to national security programs or challenges. To do that, we have three programs. We've got the Cyber Bytes Academy, which is the program that we have underneath us, where we're charting a path forward and really kind of disrupting the cyber education model. And so we're doing that in a few ways to highlight just a couple. Really, we're shifting left, as I say, shifting left into the high school market or the high school students and trying to get them cyber educated earlier. And then we've got standard and regular cybersecurity courses that we offer. Feel free to check our website for those. We offer some great prices as an introductory price right now. And then we do, as we progress, we'll move away from those bootcamp style courses and really go into a more degree granting institution model, but it won't be the standard 4 years. So we've got some great plans in line with that. The second program that we have is the American Cyber League, and that is our consortium and really helps with the innovation side of our mission. And that consortium right now is a little over 1,000 members strong, and that consists of businesses, both large and small. We've got individuals. I've got academic institutions, other nonprofits, and I've even got government organizations to everywhere from the state, local level, all the way up to the federal that are members and that participate with us in the American Cyber League. Construction of our state-of-the-art labs is ongoing and will be complete hopefully in the next 2 weeks. And then so keep an eye out, look out for the grand opening on that, which likely won't happen till sometimes toward the end of the year. But that will open up, AR and VR labs, quantum computing, data analytics. We'll have some modeling in sim, and then other emerging technology labs will be upstairs. It'll be a great facility for our members and for our students as well to be able to use. The Quantico Cyber Hub itself is really the program that helps us with the third part of our mission, which is outreach. And that from that outreach, the building itself is a 30,000 square foot facility, and it consists of classroom space, meeting space. We've got the labs, as I mentioned, and then of course we've got some administrative and offices and a Pearson VUE testing center as well. For us, it's that place where we connect with and to our community. And some examples, things we've done and we've hosted Cyber Bytes Networking Event programs like this one. We hosted Hack the Capitol this year as it went virtual. DEF CON, we hosted a couple of the villages as it went virtual. And then we do youth programs like summer camps and after school programs. So that's a little bit about the foundation and who we are. For more information on any of those programs or anything else that we offer, feel free to visit us on the web at cyberbytesfoundation.org. So we're here today really to talk about election security. And we're only a few days away, 5 days actually to be exact. And so we put together a panel of some great experts, and I'll introduce them here in a minute. But really, if looking up some statistics this morning, almost 80 million people have already voted, right? And if you look at those numbers, that's 56.5%, I think, is where that kind of falls out of this number of people who voted in 2016. So over half of the people that voted in 2016 have already voted for this election, and we're still 5 days out. Texas is actually higher at about 94. Virginia seems to be the average, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. And then I don't think it's, I think it's fair to say that this election is contentious for a variety of reasons. You've got political reasons, and we've also got security reasons, which is what I really kind of want to focus on. Before we get into the panel, Congressman Whitman has pre-recorded a video that we wanted to show now.
Well, hello, folks. There's been a lot of talk recently about the need to better protect our elections, and I couldn't agree more. I'm the proud co-sponsor of the Election Security Assistance Act, and this bill provides much needed security improvements for local election officials without overstepping the Commonwealth of Virginia authority to maintain their elections. And what it does is it assists the Commonwealth with cybersecurity enhancements that'll help them meet the needs of aging election systems. This year, things are going to look a little bit different with voting. I understand that people like the tradition of voting in person on election day, but with the potential for long lines at polling places and some of the potential unpredictable disruptions from COVID-19, I want to urge everyone to consider voting early this year, voting by absentee. And you can do that in person. You can walk right into the registrar's office all the way up to the end of October and cast a ballot in person. You don't have to have a reason. You just walk in, present your ID, and you would vote just like you would on election day when you go to the polls, except you're doing it at the registrar's office. And there's been a significant amount of turnout, so people are getting used to voting early. And while it's too late now to request a mail-in ballot, you can still do that also, request it to your home. And I think that's another very good way to go about voting early. I do not agree, though, with states sending ballots out to everybody on the voter rolls, because we know voter rolls are not 100% accurate. And the concern I have is what happens in securing those ballots. They go to somebody that may have moved away or may go to a wrong address. I think those things are right at the heart of the integrity of our voting system. So that, I think, is incredibly important. But again, I want to encourage you to vote early, to go in person to vote early. That's, I think, something that will make things much, much more convenient for you and easier, and want to make sure that your vote does indeed get recorded. And you can do that without having to go to the polls on November the 3rd. So folks, thanks again. Thank you for making the effort to go out and vote. I wish each of you God's blessings. May God bless our great Commonwealth of Virginia, and may God bless our United States of America.
Video and allowing us to share that. And as I mentioned earlier, we put together a great panel. As you can see, I've got a few here and we've got a few online as well. So I'd like to take the time to introduce them. And so first up, I have Chuck Brooks, who's joining us virtually. And Chuck is the president of Brooks Consulting and is a globally recognized leader and subject matter expert in cybersecurity and emerging technologies. He has many recognitions, way too many that I can actually discover or even talk about right now in the time that we have, but he's got quite a long list there. And has held some top-level advisor positions. But I did want to highlight that he's a subject matter expert to the Homeland Defense and Security Information Analysis Center, and is also an adjunct faculty member at Georgetown University's Graduate Applied Intelligence Program and the Graduate Cybersecurity Program, where he teaches courses on risk management, homeland security, and cybersecurity. Welcome, Chuck. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Okay, and then next up, we have Christine de Souza, who's joining us here in person. Christine is the Cyber Exercise Planner Senior Advisor for General Dynamics Information Technology, where she supports DHS CISA's exercise team. Christine sits on the board of directors for the Cybersecurity Forum Initiative, where, among other things, she's responsible for the development and instruction of cyber warfare and cybersecurity educational courses. Christina also serves in the military, as a part-time as a cyber warfare operations officer in the 175th Cyberspace Operations Group in the Maryland National Guard. And there she's a representative of the elections sector for the Critical Infrastructure and Key Resources Support Team. In 2019, she was named as one of the top 25 women in cybersecurity, and then in 2020, one of the top 100 women in cybersecurity. Christine, welcome.
Thank you.
Next up, I'd like to introduce Brian Engle. Brian is the Vice President of Cybersecurity Services and Operation and the Chief Information Security Officer for CyberDefenses. He leads the security operations, advisory, consulting, and program management teams, providing services to their dynamic and growing customer base. Prior to joining CyberDefenses, Brian was an independent cybersecurity consultant and founder of Riskceptional Strategies. He was also the CISO and cyber coordinator for the state of Texas. Brian, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Of course, thank you.
Next up, I'd like to introduce Maggie MacAlpine. She is an election security specialist, serial entrepreneur, and one of the co-founders of the DEF CON voting machine hacking village, which we had the pleasure to host, by the way, over the summer here at the Quantico Cyber Hub. Maggie has served as an ambassador for the Office of the Secretary of State of California for the Risk Limiting Audit Pilot Program from 2011 to 2012, and she's widely recognized as an expert on the use of high-speed scanners for conducting post-election audits. As a pro bono consultant, and most recently with her firm Nordic Innovation Labs, she has advised on election security and auditing practices in numerous US states. Maggie, thank you for joining us. Next, I'd like to introduce Dan Persico. You may have seen him sneaking in, but we had some traffic. We got some great weather today and some traffic issues. So Dan, thanks for making it up here. But Dan is the Chief Information Officer for the Virginia Department of Elections. He's enjoyed a successful IT career for nearly 20 years. He spent the last 10 years in various leadership roles and previously specialized in network engineering and information security. A strong believer in service before self, Dan spent 15 years in the United States Air Force and has volunteered his time to several charitable organizations. So Dan, welcome.
Thank you.
And last, but certainly not least, we've got Hari Herstein joining us. Hari is a world-renowned data security expert, internet visionary, and serial entrepreneur. He is board chairman of the Election Integrity Foundation. He began his career as the prodigy behind the first commercial public email and online forum system in Scandinavia. He founded his first company at the age of 13 and then went on to co-found EUNet Finland in his mid-20s. Today, he continues to innovate and find solutions to the world's most vexing problems. And we count Hari as a friend and a partner through the Election Integrity Foundation. So Hari, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so now that the introductions are out of the way, the first question I wanted to pose, and I'll pose this really to everybody here, is early voting, right? So at the top of this program, we had talked about the 80 million people so far who have voted early, and whether that's in person or that's through mail-in ballots, that's a pretty staggering number, I think, right? So we've still got 5 days left. For some states like Texas, that's 94% of the of the population that voted in 2016. As I mentioned earlier, Virginia, that's about 56%, and that's really somewhere in the mid-50s nationwide, right? So again, that's kind of a large turnout. From a security perspective, and with only 5 days left, are we in the clear, right? I mean, what issues really kind of lie ahead, right? So Christine, I'll give you the opportunity to answer that one first.
Already in the clear. Hopefully, if anyone had plans to initiate any kind of security initiatives that they hadn't done yet, hopefully they've already done that by now. One of the concerns I would have regarding the early voting is, I know, and I'm not sure how it is with all of the states, and maybe you have more information about that, regarding since so many people have voted early, I have heard mixed reports about if they're allowed to start counting that or not. In some states, I don't know if maybe they're not allowed to, and some they are. So I think a concern of mine would be premature release of results that may affect those who have not yet voted, which could feed some of the misinformation or disinformation that's out there.
Sure, great. Chuck, I'd like to give you an opportunity to answer that question as well.
Sure. For one thing, I don't really think it changes the cyber security landscape. There's 3,000 state jurisdictions out there that all have different machines and different voting mechanisms. So I think it's going to be a different situation for each state. In terms of the overall vote, I mean, yeah, it's pretty interesting that there's that many people voting early. There's a lot of factors, of course, COVID probably being one of the biggest factors. But I think there might be also a lot of people that vote this time that didn't. So it's difficult to factor in those numbers. And so I think you have to look at more from the security standpoint. And the real security standpoint is you've got two different issues. Now you have the digital cyber issue, and now you have the physical mailing. And the physical mailing actually may be more of a difficult security issue than digital this time. I think a lot of investment is already going into protecting a lot of these state jurisdictions. And we'll have to wait and see.
Great points. Maggie, any thoughts on that?
Oh, well, I definitely agree with Christine. We're worried about, any kind of meltdown that can happen along the lines of mail-in voting. We're worried about states that might not have their rules changed. Though there's very few of them who haven't made exceptions for beginning the count early to anticipate the absentee ballots. I would say we have concerns because the election's not over yet. And also, when people ask me, do we have security threats, I kind of want to narrow down what do they mean. Do they mean like security threats as in, your ability to cast a ballot, or for example, a tabulation hack or something on the, other end? I'd say I don't particularly feel in the clear until the election is certified personally.
Sure. And I think both to your and Christine's point, some states aren't even allowed to start counting until election day, right? And so that I think that'll extend this, and that'll be very interesting to watch. Dan, I want to provide you an opportunity to answer that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, the threat never ends, in my opinion. The threat actually exists even outside of election period, but for the purposes of this upcoming election, it isn't over until it's over, and that's the certification and then following with the you know, the results being passed to the electoral college, and then that process being complete. And we expect to see, although like Virginia, as an example, to your point, Virginia is tracking, you know, what's been, you know, who has cast ballots and whatnot, but we're not like tabulating, if you will, on exact numbers at this point. There's still going to be, even after election day next Tuesday, there's still going to be absentee ballots that will be accepted and processed following that event, because of the laws here in Virginia allow for, you know, postmark by a certain date, but that, you know, the post office could have some delays, experience some delays in getting it to the registrars, who would then have to process and things of that nature. So there's a threat. There are threats with continued threats with misinformation and disinformation that will exist all the way to election day and through election day, that we have to be cognizant of and vigilant for. That can include, you know, threat actors putting out information that says, hey, your polling place should be here, right? That can continue all the way through. There's been a lot of conversation about physical security threats with the post office and things of that nature. I don't know if I have a lot of detail to expound upon on that. However, the reality that could exist does continue to keep us, you know, our eyes on everything. It doesn't just stop on election day, and it won't stop, and all the way through any other subsequent election.
Sure. Great, thank you. And Brian, get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we see is that this, you know, the focal point of election day is when we get maybe most intrigued. But now we see this election season. So an earlier starting point, a recognition that in maybe no change for many states that had a week or 10 days or 2 weeks of a certification period occurring after the election. So, you know, it introduces, you know, are we in the clear? You know, well, no, not until we reach that final kind of culmination point when election results can be completely certified. So, you know, that's the aspect of having, you know, patience for the process to play out, for elections administrators to realize that during this elongated period, you know, the protection of equipment, ballots, processes, and integrity of the processes has perhaps, you know, a longer period of time, more things that can occur that could be disruptive to that process. And more communication that has to occur to constituents to make sure that everyone's really informed and understands what's happening within the process to help defeat the types of things that can occur once that sort of deadline hits, but the results are not final. And you know, to the degree of speculation and the things that occur in this realm at a time when we have, you know, an increased amount of participation, which is outstanding. You know, 100% participation, I think, is what many elections administrators would love to see. They prepare in some ways for that. But also the fact that now with these elongated periods, you know, the realization that many elections are operated by somewhat supplemental staff. I don't want to say volunteers per se, but you know, there's a lot of people that contribute to the process in the middle of a pandemic. So, you know, there's a lot of things that go into what this sort of elongated election season it unfolds, which introduces, you know, more potential threats and more potential issues to consider for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And Hari, offer you the opportunity to kind of round that one out.
We are definitely not out of the woods, but let me first address what is way better, fundamentally better this year than 2016. 2016, a lot of the early voting, in-person early voting was done by unauditable touchscreen machines where the only record was a digital record. And of course, that means that in the election day, if you cannot start processing the paper ahead of time, you got a faster results. But the key point is those were digital unauditable machines. We use less and less those, and especially in this early voting, places like Texas, which is a hot spot, Texas is using way less unauditable touchscreen machines in early voting. Again, the other part here is a communication and disinformation. I just came from Atlanta, where I was yesterday, and in Atlanta, early voting is going on, and in the polling places, you usually see a big bin or basket of absentee ballots being destroyed by the county rules and the state rules. The way if you show up with your absentee ballot, whether you have already started voting or not, that ballot is going to be destroyed. The poll workers are not going to destroy it. You have to rip it as a voter apart. And then there's a discard pile of these ripped ballots. Some of them are voted, some of them not. But that fact that you have a discarded ballot and destroyed ballots is good thing. That's how the system should be working. So biggest problem here is that this is the first time with the social media when Americans are starting to realize, and they should start to realize more, that my state and my county is not voting the same way as the neighboring state or neighboring county. And when the practice is, when this knowledge is lost and people are telling what they see in their county, that might be completely misinterpreted by the listener who is comparing that to their own county's processes. So again, a lot of news about seeing destroyed ballots, that alone doesn't mean that anything wrong has happened. But it can be obviously speed to be telling the wrong story, giving the false sense of something is going wrong.
Okay, and that's actually a really good segue, I think, because my next question was going to be really compared to 2016. How do we rate ourselves, right? Are we doing better or worse, and then why, right? So first off, I mean, we can go in the same order. So Christine, compared to 2016, how are we doing?
I think we're definitely more aware, absolutely, and alert of the threats that are out there to election security and election infrastructure. DHS, with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, they had what was the Election Security Task Force has now been kind of combined with some other initiatives that they are now the Election Security Initiative, ESI. We have an ISAC that was stood up, an Information Sharing and Analysis Center for Elections Infrastructure, the EISAC. So we have all these initiatives to help counter some of these known threats and to help protect the confidence that the American people have in the elections, process itself. The hashtag Protect 2020 campaign was a really big initiative that came out earlier this year, and there's the guidance that's along with that, the hashtag Protect 2020 guidance for all levels of citizens, and this is all done with the goal to help counter some of these threats. The misinformation, disinformation, they sent out a new thing, was it earlier this week or was it last week? The days are starting to run together for me right now because it's so crazy with the elections coming up. But they're countering, misinformation, disinformation campaigns, and lots of good stuff. So it definitely shows that we're at least more aware of the potential threats that are out there.
Yeah. And Chuck, so same question to you is, how do we compare to 2016? Better, worse, and why?
Oh, I think we're in much better shape, and certainly much better shape from the old hanging chat era. I think Christine really summarized the reasons why. We have so many federal, state, and private sector agencies looking into how to fortify and build layers around security, and I think particularly DHS CISA, who's really invested a lot in training state and local officials on information sharing, on vulnerability assessments, on how to detect things, on best practices, and they've provided a lot of, and also incident response too, a lot of free resources to them, because one of the problems has been is a lot of budgets for state and local have been almost nothing, and there's IT infrastructures that they're very old. So we've looked at that situation and tried to build around it, and I think there's a lot of fortification that's happened because of DHS. And one other thing that I think is really worth calling attention to is that just recently the FBI and Microsoft intercepted, or basically intercepted, but they took out a trick bot, which has been around for a long time, and that could have been devastating an election systems network and they took out their command and control system, preemptive action. That's unprecedented. I think they have our intelligence agencies and private sector work on that. And the thing that really, I think if I can say that.
So Chuck, I think we have there's a slight delay and/or I don't know, maybe your internet connection. We're getting you kind of very choppy. So hopefully we don't lose you on this. But if I can, I'd like to kind of continue, right? So Maggie, the same
paper and mailing and digital. I really hacker. I would be targeting the election
Maggie, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I just was still getting audio from Chuck, so I didn't want to override that. So yeah, so how are we doing this year? Well, I would say the fact that we're having this, webinar is certainly encouraging. I often joke that once upon a time, 10 years ago, in the before times, if I brought up election security, no one would, people's eyes would glaze over almost immediately. So certainly the fact that people are aware of these issues, that they care about these issues, and hopefully, beyond the election year and the, initial the excitement around a federal election, that's extremely encouraging. As Hari noted earlier, we've reduced the number of touchscreen machines. We've got CISA involved. One problem we had in 2016 was that, for these attacks, the officials didn't have ways, they didn't have the clearance to be alerted of attacks on their jurisdictions. And that's since been addressed. As far as I know, there's been some positive movement in that direction with sharing information, the awareness of sharing information, the awareness around cybersecurity. So I'd say that there's always room for improvement. This is a marathon, not a sprint. There's a lot of stuff that if I could wave a magic wand and make it better, I would definitely want to do. But I think just this awareness around disinformation and attacks on the systems and things like that can be encouraging. And I just, I'm just crossing my fingers that it doesn't just all that, enthusiasm, all that energy doesn't just vanish, on November 4th. Now, if it lessens because the election is done and dusted and everything's very relaxed, that would be fantastic too. But I hope that this isn't, people recognize, the ongoing importance of this going forward, especially as elections and technology in general infiltrates more places and more things are connected to the internet even when they shouldn't be, things get, there is just that need for that expertise and to recognize threats and to realize that we are on the map. I think there was also a bit of a naivete in 2016 that America wasn't subject to these sort of international disinformation attacks like other countries were, and just like waking up to the fact that, yeah, it's not ideal, but we have to be aware of this, and you have to be aware that there are other players on the stage right now who might not have your best interest at heart.
Right. No, good points. Dan.
Absolutely. So from my perspective, I will reiterate what everyone else has said, which is, the sharing of information is absolutely critical at all levels. The elections community has changed significantly since 2016 in the fact that, there was actual threats that, that were discovered following, and it highlighted the need to add a level of maturity to the elections world holistically. And from my perspective, again, not only was the information sharing a critical component, but also the election officials holistically taking an approach to increase staff, bring in cybersecurity professionals, to work on things to help mature postures holistically across, the various states. Specifically in Virginia, we've done a lot. We've utilized the Help America Vote Act funds specifically to bring in staff to help us build IT governance, IT security governance, and things of that nature that will help us to not only defend against the threat actors, which we're not going to go away, we all know, but to try to stay a step ahead always. And I think that's one of the major components that I've seen. And I know Virginia's done a great job at that. And some of my my partners in other states have done excellent job. I think everybody's starting to communicate and talk, look at ways that we can do more with less, and then also exchange that information. To Maggie's point, one of the biggest things was when there are threats, which would normally have been, dealt with in the national security realm as, classified at whatever level, there have been ways to kind of, I wouldn't say fully declassify, but be able to extract data from the actual classified intelligence and be able to distribute that through, the elections infrastructure, ISAC, and other organizations like Souza to help us be aware, so we can have an eye on what to look for specifically. I think that's been extremely helpful and has taken us, almost in a 180 from my perspective from where we were in 2016.
Oh, great. Yeah, thank you. So Brian, wanted to give you an opportunity. Compared to 2016, better, worse, and why?
I mean, it's an interesting question because it kind of takes and says, like, we have a election going on when, so it's somewhat in reality, we have over 3,000 elections happening at this time. So, I think that absolutely agree with everything everyone has said to this point, that in aggregate, there's been a lot of things purposed and focused on creating a much better awareness and understanding of what the issues, the threats and the risks are, and that sharing of information has helped to, I think, make sure that everyone knows that there's more to be done from 2016, moving forward to today. The work that we've done has been, at an organization by organization, municipality level. So, I mean, a testament that over 500 organizations that we've worked with and, well over that interfaced with, that taking advantage of programs, conducting assessments, evaluating, and finding distinct actions between 2016 and this time frame to improve upon. Holistically, we've advanced in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways, I'd say it's just different. It was mentioned that it's a marathon and not a sprint. We're in a journey. And, so tomorrow or, for the 2022 elections, there will be other things. And so I think getting into a place where we're able to see that the landscape evolves, to see that the threats may evolve and be positioned to adjust fire, if you will, to those types of situations is the improvements that we'd like to see overall. But absolutely being able to deal with the things that we see changing and that occurred in 2016 or occurring today, and be able to be better positioned and on better footing is, I would say yes, we're in better shape. But I'll concur that it's a journey.
Awesome. I love all the positivity. And Hari, just give you an opportunity to answer that question as well. So compared to 2016, better, worse, and why?
The elements in elections which we had 2016, almost everything has been improving from those points. If we look what is the story, the negative story for the early voting, it's the long lines. It's a 5-hour, 8-hour lines. And a lot of times we are looking at the pictures, and when we see a long line, it's obviously bad. But sometimes short line is equally bad if the line is not moving. The technology which is causing these long lines is really unproven technology, which is now implemented in the elections in 2020, which was not there in the same scale 2016. I'm talking about using the statewide databases as a checking mechanism remotely over internet. I'm talking about a massive deployment of electronic poll book systems, which are causing a lot of problems, and then ballot marking devices, which were originally conceived as in a Help America Vote Act as a mechanism to help disabled voters who cannot use a pen and paper and do hand-marked paper ballots. Now they are being rolled, these kind of devices like here, to be a universal method. So all these three elements, which are basically attributing most of the negative news we hear in early voting, this was not used in 2016 in such scale, which only underlines the fact that we have to be responsible when we are taking new technology. We have to be implementing security standards testing and really a critical thinking before going and adding new technology into the area. Because as I said, so far the reported problems come from technology which was not used in same scale 2016.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. No, I think those are all great answers. And I think the theme kind of out of that last one was really the communication and the teamwork that's kind of going on between the state, local, federal, and potentially even the commercial side, right, with the vendors and those things. Wanted to take a quick break here and remind everyone that if you have any questions, please submit them into the Q&A, and we'll make some time at the end to address those questions that show up there. So moving on, the third kind of theme or question I wanted to talk about, and we had talked about this, a couple of us had talked about this just prior to the start of the webinar, and really it comes down to all, you know, if you do a Google search for election security, you know, I hope you have a day and a half to read through kind of everything that shows up, right? I had originally started that Google search because I wanted to talk about the voter rolls that were stolen, right? But then as I look through the news feeds, it's like, hey, oh, by the way, Georgia's, you know, security verification file has been locked through ransomware. And if I remember correctly, somebody in Florida hacked in and changed either the governor's or somebody else's mailing address in the voter rolls, right? So now, I mean, and I bring all of this up to really illustrate the breadth of the problem, right? So we've got these great voting machines here as a backdrop and as props to the webinar, and they're one piece, right? A lot of people focus on the technology and the weakness of the technology, but they're just one piece of the larger picture that is the election system, right? So what I wanted to do, and it's a bit of a vague question, but I wanted to provide everybody a little bit of kind of latitude to really discuss, okay, the breadth of the problem, right? The breadth of everything that could possibly, you know, that we have to secure, and really, again, focus on the fact that it's way more than just the machines, it's the entire process, right? So, so Maggie, wanted to kind of start with you. I mean, any
Sure.
thoughts that you have on election security as it relates to the whole ecosystem, if you will?
Sure. I mean, I think one problem we saw a lot with the voting village is a sort of misunderstanding on the layman's side of hearing something like an election has been hacked to automatically mean like something that like tabulation has been changed, or that that's a widespread threat, or that's something we have a lot of evidence of all over the place, which are all simply not true. The terminology can get a little clouded when you remember that elections technically start, well, with the founding of democracy, but also with like the beginning of a cycle, with the campaign declaring itself, with an issue getting brought up. And it goes all the way, and I'm going to steal a line from Hari here, I apologize in advance, to the peaceful transition of power. So everything in between can technically be the election. So the campaign getting hacked, technically the election gets hacked. You know, the tabulation getting changed, very small part of that. Somebody's address being changed against their will could be a hack on the internal back system of how people are able to vote. A power outage that downs the e-poll book, so people are stuck in line for hours and hours and they don't get to vote within a window that's convenient for them as a form of voter suppression, or even just an accident, could be, you know, an attack on the election or a mistake in the election. And that clouded terminology, I think, can lead to a lot of the other thing we need to worry about, which is disinformation, misinformation. People thinking that their vote won't count, or being told their vote won't count when election security experts bring up, you know, relevant, you know, protective measures or threats that we're worried about, or even when campaigns sensationalize certain, you know, hiccups and pretty standard stuff, pretty minor stuff, to make it seem like, you know, the election is under assault from places that we're not really necessarily worried about, but the attack itself can be the misinformation. So, you know, the landscape is hugely vast, and that's why I really value all these experts here, because so many of them have such deep insight into like what CISA is doing, you know, what everybody's doing to protect the election, and what a huge and multifaceted thing that actually means under that umbrella term.
Yeah, no, great point. I mean, it's a huge, as I mentioned, as I was looking at it and coming up with things for today, I mean, it's you really begin to understand the breadth of sort of, I'll say, the problem. Brian, I wanted to get your thoughts on that too. Again, so from, you know, the wide variety of things that could be election security, right? Like, just kind of get your thoughts on that and some of the issues maybe associated with something maybe we haven't already discussed.
You know, what Maggie was saying there was, I think, just so spot on. We look at things in terms of a risk profile and the types of issues that can occur and how to manage within that. You know, you have to fight the battle on the battlefield that you're on. It's changing and it evolves. When we look at, you know, an election, there's almost a near zero tolerance for things to go wrong. And the things that can go wrong are, Maggie mentioned, you know, power failure or something, an availability issue in the middle of an election. You know, with a longer early voting period, there's more chance to recover, but there's an immovable deadline. I mean, there's a time frame that, you know, in other IT type projects, if something goes wrong, you shift the deadline. You cannot do that in an election. Availability is like order of the day. But so is integrity. I mean, like every part of the process has to be infallible, and accuracy and all of the things that go into that. It's just paramount. I think the thing that is somewhat interesting is that there's you know, the confidentiality of information is interesting. You'll see these sort of we'll call them false flag operations. Somebody will post publicly available information about a voter roll and claim to have hacked a voter database. And, you know, that feeds into the speculation, misinformation and disinformation kind of piece of that. So there's aspects of information associated with an election. You know, what's on a ballot is completely public. What's in a ballot before it's completely constructed is not. And an error that's made when an elections department is assembling a ballot, a misspelling, a misordering, leaving off a candidate, feeds again into the speculation piece there. So one of the things that we found is just, you know, it's fascinating because typically in cybersecurity, you work off of, you know, impact and probabilities, and you attack the biggest problems first. And when we look at things in aggregate, I think we can kind of see that small numbers of things going wrong likely don't impact an overall election. At a presidential level, maybe, and we've seen narrow margins and other types of things. So this aspect of sort of zero tolerances, you know, financial industry, you might be able to lose a couple hundred credit cards as a bank a month and react or respond to it. But in elections, you know, you're operating on just you know, this impunable zero tolerance level. And so I think that's the biggest factor to consider, is that we're always going to see things go perhaps wrong or issues, but being able to sort of detect them, recover from them, and then really be very transparent to the public about what happened inside of those issues, so that all the good work that goes into making sure that those issues are not factors in the overall outcomes of elections is really, really important.
Yeah, no, great point. And it almost reminds me of you know, it's one of those events where the best you can do is break even. Right? Like you're never sort of going to win, or I shouldn't say win, you're never going to really get ahead. The best you're going to do is break even, where the election is fair and agreeable, right, to the results. So kind of a bit of a flip to that question, right? So yes, it's a broad spectrum of things that go into the election umbrella term, as Maggie put it, right? But Christine, any thoughts on how do we combat some of that stuff, right? I mean, given that it's such a wide breadth of things, what recommendations do we have where we can combat that?
I would say one of the absolute best ways is the information sharing. Some of these breaches that we've heard about, you know, we come to find out they knew about it a month ago or 3 months ago or something, and it's important to share early, share often. Share, you know, when you have a breach or some kind of compromise, people and organizations are hesitant to share that information. You know, you don't want, it's embarrassing, or it can cause reputational damage. But sharing that information, reporting it to the proper authorities, the proper channels, so that they can then alert other organizations. That is how we defeat the adversary, and that is how we defeat those who are trying to penetrate our confidence and our networks. You have to share the information on what you know. Every little bit could be a piece of a broader campaign or something. You know, even no matter how small it is, it might be part of something bigger. So that information sharing piece is so essential.
Right, and I like how you put that with the confidence, right? Like it's really about maintaining confidence in the system overall for the voters and really for everybody, right? To maintain that confidence. So I like that. Dan, wanted to get your thoughts on some potential things that we could be doing, you know, that kind of help across the spectrum.
Absolutely. So, Christine, that was a perfect point, and it goes back to the analogy of like when we fought wars on the battlefield. You know, intelligence was everything, right? That's how we gained the advantage on the enemy. And so in this case, it's the same concept, and so that's really important. The other thing that, you know, we need to focus in on, and I know that some cybersecurity experts out there are going to love, you know, when you're looking at, you know, protecting the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of a system, CIA triad, a lot of one of the best measures is to use defense in depth, right? When I say the word defense in depth, though, in the aspect of elections, I don't just use that term as something where we're just going to throw 5 firewalls in front of the voter registration database and call it a day, because it does matter the physical security aspects, the operational security aspects, as well as the information security aspects. They play together. So when we think about the cybersecurity defense in depth, we want to take the word cybersecurity out of it and look at elections security in depth, right? And that does include being able to proactively react to a power outage and be able to quickly react to a report of a mis or disinformation campaign that is going on and move on those things. It's not just about the hacking, of sorts. It is about getting ahead of problems that exist that could cause voters to feel disenfranchised or cause the appearance that something is happening negative when it really is just, okay, a tree fell, power line's down, we have a power outage, so let's get some information about that and let's be quick to react so that nobody else puts a narrative on it that is not necessarily true. So that defense in depth is bigger than just, again, the cybersecurity piece where you're throwing a bunch of firewalls and VLANs and stuff of that nature in front of critical systems of sorts.
Sure. And Chuck, what are your thoughts on that? We may have lost Chuck. So Hari, I'll move to you then. What are your thoughts on that?
Election security, like all security, is all about discipline. If you lose your discipline, you will not provide and you are not going to accomplish your mission in security. Information sharing is very important. We have been talking about information sharing about when something happens by an outside actor. Equally important it would be to share information, what I'm planning to do as a practitioner, and what are, is it smart thing? I give you 2 examples which have been recently widely published. In Georgia, they decided between the primary and the real election, general election, remove all the passwords from the electronic poll books because they were inconvenient and poll books have problems to log in. Well, that's not exactly best practice, removing passwords. Furthermore, it was now published and become widely known that there had been problems in 2-factor authentication of other both elections-related systems, and the 2-factor authentication had been slow, so they removed 2-factor authentication. Not exactly best practice either. Also, because we know who are practitioners that it's the oldest trick in the book. When you have already the passwords, but you cannot use it because of 2-factor authentication, you bombard the 2-factor authentication so it gets slow and annoying and hope that they're stupid enough to remove it. That's a very well-known practice. So again, it's not only what outside actors or bad actors are doing to you, but also maybe you should ask from other people, is the thing I'm planning to do, I've already done, is that the smart move?
Okay, great. So I wanted to pivot to the my last kind of question here, and really that's the threats are evolving, right? But so are the security professionals. And I think what we've heard throughout this whole conversation so far is the information sharing. It's the education piece, and we are actually kind of excited to announce we want a grant to do that in partnership with the Election Integrity Foundation, as a matter of fact, to do education and information sharing among state, local, tribal governments, right? So that's one piece. What I want to do is now I want to stretch you guys, right? So we've talked about education, we've talked about information sharing, right? What else can we be doing, whether it's the general public or whether it's the government or whether it's industry or nonprofits that are doing all this work? What else can we be doing to really further election security and understanding we may never get ahead of it, but at least stay at pace, right? So that we're not kind of always behind. So Chuck, I wanted to give you the opportunity to answer that first. Chuck, you might still be muted, self-muted. Okay, Dan, I'd like to move to you then.
My first first thought on that is there is a, for the most part, there is a, we have all these, information sharing tools, HAVA funds, all these things that have occurred in recent years that have helped to strengthen the overall elections community. The one thing that we need to do to help expand so that everybody is at the same page is to identify those who may not have the resources or capabilities, maybe in more rural areas around the country, and kind of help try to provide them with whatever resources and tools that they need so that they can come in line with other people, because there is a not all localities, governments, et cetera, are equal, right? And so to strengthen the overall elections posture, it is critical to recognize that, hey, we have folks that may not be where we are, like one person may not be as ahead as another person or organization, I should say. And it is important that we look at, to try to identify who is a little bit behind and try to bring them in line and allow a level of consistency across the board, whether we're talking about cybersecurity specifically to elections, or we're talking about just even how we handle operations, how we're dealing with misinformation, disinformation, things of that nature. I think that would be a critical piece to try to focus in on as well.
Okay, great. Christine, I'm going to provide you the opportunity next.
Just along the same thing, just get involved. Get involved, start developing those relationships with the resources that are available in your area, that are available in your state, the fusion centers, the MSI SACs. A lot of states have cyber units for their National Guard. If you do experience something strange within your network or you see something weird, you can contact your local National Guard, and they can do what's called a Cyber 9 line, where they can take the information that you're seeing, feed it back to Cyber Command, and see if there's additional information about any of those indicators, and can feed that back to you. It's designed to be unclassified, so it's there in the unclassed domain. And so there's a Cyber 9 line, and the fusion centers, and I agree strongly with reaching out to those who may not be aware of what resources are available to them, because there are a lot. No matter where you live, there's something available.
Great, thank you. And I wanted to go back. We're doing this the old-fashioned way. If any former military red or yellow canaries way back in the day, but so I think Chuck, hopefully I get this right. So he says that his thoughts are the thoughts he wanted to add are: don't neglect the insider threat. Accidental or intentional is an existing cybersecurity vulnerability in almost any network. So I wanted to make sure we got Chuck's thoughts out there. And then Hari, would like to get your thoughts on other than the sharing and the, I don't want to say the easy answer, but the one we've been providing to date, right, is this information sharing. And I don't want to downplay that because it's important, but other than the information sharing and the knowledge transfer, what else can be done? What else can or should we be doing?
So education still is the key, and we started a DEF CON Unhack the Ballot initiative, which then for this year became a cyber search, a one-off concentrated effort to get security professionals and meet them, matchmake them with election officials who need help. This is if you're caring, you should consider becoming a poll worker. Obviously, the only sure way of disenfranchising your own vote is to not to vote. But if you have energy, there's a huge demand for knowledge and help out in the field. Just people who, even in informal way, will educate the local election officials what they should be thinking about, how they should be evaluating the offers get them, etc. So now we have mechanisms to make that matchmaking to happen. So please consider donating your time and helping the democracy to thrive by donating some of your time, and maybe you make friends in the process.
And getting involved, I love it. So Brian, your thoughts?
So I think the thing I'd most like to see, because a lot of what we have seen is to be very tactical, and it's the information sharing is somewhat at a whack-a-mole threat level, is a much more strategic and overarching approach. And so, realizing that it's not a homogeneous sort of problem to be solved, but that individual organizations develop a strategy, align that to to a plan. If we talked about earlier, it's a journey. That journey has to have a plan to proceed upon the course. You have a starting point, you have somewhat of a never-ending destination, but it shouldn't just meander about. So the funding that to me goes along with that. So if you have independent strategies, then you can look for things that are somewhat commonalities or how to support those strategies, because I just feel like the funding has been somewhat ad hoc, inconsistent, always loaded with some degree of complexity that doesn't have enough sort of levers there to be able to sort of apply to the problems of individual organizations. And it might mean the replacement of voting equipment or a number of other things. So to me, the information sharing should get to the place where we're getting the ability to support independent strategies with a more overarching strategy to gain ground faster.
Great, thank you. So Maggie, I wanted to give you the opportunity to close out that question.
Oh, sure. Well, I was thinking about, everybody's suggestions are fantastic, and it's the risk you run when we all kind of get asked the same thing is like, we often have a shared brain cell there. But I would say I try to break it up into like really simple actionable things. So like if you're an individual and you maybe don't have the time, or maybe you can't be a poll worker if you can as an individual. We're a little past the deadline, but there are more elections next year. Don't spread disinformation on election night, and that can include pictures of long lines. One of the attacks I did in a red team exercise lately was mislabeling long lines to be the area that I didn't want to vote, and then augmenting that on Twitter. So even everything, just check everything at least one other place before you share it. And if something's making you emotional, it's probably designed to, and you should be wary of that. And that's just on the individual level. I would say if you are an election official, God forbid I tell you what to do, but one thing I would definitely love to see more of is the DHS maxim, if you see something, say something, to get a little beyond the pithiness. Actually, if you sense something is wrong, like your spouse gets a weird email from your work email, in the town clerk's office, definitely bring it up. And we need to stop victim shaming people here about this sort of stuff so that they're not reluctant. And the thing is, election night is going to be under assault, and we don't necessarily always know where that's coming from. I'll let other experts speak to that a little bit more if they would like to. But basically, if something is pinging you as weird, bring it up. It might seem like nothing. Don't hide it. Don't think that you're going to get in trouble. We really need to know this sort of thing. And I'm probably preaching to the choir here, so I don't want to condescend to anybody. And if you're a vendor, I would definitely say, or not necessarily a vendor in the space, but a vendor who's thinking of going into the space, really do your research. I've seen a lot of tendency in tech companies to think they can tech think their way out of any problem. But the election security space is incredibly nuanced and specific. The risks there are very different from other industries and fields. And you can really put your foot in it if you come in saying like, well, my email client will be great for secure delivery of ballots. It's like, we've thought of this and we know why it, that doesn't actually work. And don't just walk in. You especially see it with like kind of celebrities and big names. So they'd be like, I've got the new internet voting solution. Please don't do that. Come in, be a poll worker, speak to experts, hire my firm, sit down with people who have been working in this field for a while and actually explore the possibilities before you jump in saying, well, obviously I've thought about this for 5 minutes and I know how to solve everything. And I've seen a little bit of arrogance on the vendor side with that. So definitely just like, this is a complicated field. These are not easy problems or we would have solved them already. And just have that awareness and that humility and never be afraid to, reach out, communicate. All these wonderful communication channels are being set up, utilize them. And I think that would be my closeout message.
Great, thank you. So we started a little bit late. We went over a little bit. So I want to just be respectful of everybody's time, both in person and online. So we'll end it there. I think that actually, Maggie, was a great spot to end it at. So I wanted to take time, Chuck, Christine, Dan, Hari, Brian, and Maggie. Thank you all very much for joining us today. I think to everybody's point here, get out, vote, be a participant. Be careful. I think somebody once mentioned think before you click, right? So, have a great day and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.